Hi everyone, I'm Bernadette McBurney, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to Women in the Spotlight. This series is the opportunity to hear from women like us and how they show up as leaders in all aspects of their lives. They are inspiring, passionate, real, and they come from all sectors, business, sports, education, healthcare. And today I have the immense privilege and pleasure to bring to you Michelle Wines. She's powerful, she radiates literally positive energy and love and deeply cares about people and the world. Welcome, Michelle.
Thank you. I really appreciate being here, Bernadette. Thank you for having me.
Michelle is the Chief Equity and Inclusion Officer at Children's Mercy Hospital in Kansas City, Missouri. She is a strategic leader and former practicing attorney who is deft at implementing best practices um, and build and deliver meaningful, effective policies to reflect and support and really inclusivity and culture initiative in organization. She's nationally rewarded presenter and author and has received numerous awards um, and in her many meaningful contributions all around. So, Michelle, having said all that, very impressive background, and I'm so excited to have you here. Is what would you like to share maybe with the audience on a more personal level so they feel that they know you a little bit better?
Yeah, so even outside of being a former practicing lawyer and a chief equity and inclusion officer, I also am a mom of three daughters. And my daughters just bring me such joy. I have a 27-year-old who is a professional dancer. She lives in London and is dancing. I've got a 25-year-old who is she just finished her second year of law school in Chicago at Northwestern. And then I have a 20-year-old who is a rising junior in college. And she is playing semi-pro soccer this summer in Minnesota. So I am on the road a lot. And so I would say I love to travel. So I'm fortunate that my girls are in three different places and I get to go and visit them and just really get to visit and enjoy other cultures, enjoy meeting people and seeing and experiencing the world through their eyes as well. So that's a little bit about me. And I love social media. I have to say, I'm always Snapchatting my daughters. I mean, you would think, oh, professional woman, she's not on Snapchat and Instagram, but I am. And we Snapchat each other pretty regularly. I would say I probably get, 6 to 7 snaps a day between the three of them. And so it's just funny to see kind of where we are in our day and, whether it's just waking up in the morning or, someone's at a stoplight driving, they just snap me a little picture. And so it's great just keeping up with them and sharing our lives that way.
That's wonderful. Thank you,
Yeah.
Michelle. So,
Yeah.
Michelle, during our conversation, as we were preparing for this conversation today, you really shared something that is very close to your heart, that you feel very strong about and you want to talk about. And it is all around owning your story. Would you tell us about this?
So, yes, I'm excited to talk about today owning my story, owning one story. I am part of a book that just debuted a couple weeks ago, and it's called Own Your Story, Empower, Connect, and Create Change. And it's a group of 30 plus women who talk about our stories and talk about the professional obstacles and triumphs that we've had within our careers. We also talk about our personal triumphs and obstacles as well. And so in this story, I share a little bit about something that happened to me as a brand new baby associate, summer associate at a law firm. I had just finished my first year of law school and I had applied to several law firms to work as a summer associate or an intern, as would be known in corporate America. And I got a job at a Tony law firm here in Kansas City. And I was thrilled about this job. And I would say that one of the things that we as law students got really excited about was the fact that you got an office the size of attorneys who had been practicing for a number of years. You got the salary that was equivalent of what lawyers were making at the time. And so we were really excited about this job. And so there were 7 of us that were in my class of interns or summer associates. And on the first day, they take us around to each one of our offices. And as everybody stops at their office, we're oohing and awing at, the size of the office, and everybody's just so excited. So my 6 comrades, everybody gets shown their office, and everybody had a great office and beautiful and all of that. And so when we finally get to my office, I am given a paralegal size office. So it's not the size office that the attorneys have or that my colleagues who were also summer interns had, and didn't have a window or anything like that. And so it was just a little disconcerting, as you can imagine, for a new intern. And so I immediately thought in my head, well, did I not get the office because I'm the only African American summer intern, which I was. I was one of, I think, 3 or 4 women out of the 7 of us. And so I thought, well, it couldn't be because I'm a woman, because the other women, certainly had a nice size office. And then I thought, well, maybe it's because I'm the only first year associate, right? Because everybody else had 2 years of law school under their belt. And so for me, I just, I think I just kind of chalked it up to, okay, well, I'm the only first year here. Get over it, Michelle, and get on with your business, right? And just do the work that's assigned to you, do the very best that you can, and earn your spot to be able to come back next summer. And so that's what I did. I didn't ask anybody any questions. I didn't make a big stink of it. And I literally, just the work that was given to me, I did as good of a job as I could. I was really engaged and involved. And I talk about in my chapter about how I did things that I had never done before. I went on the float trip that they have every summer. I had never in my life been on a float trip before. And so we drove a couple hours outside of Kansas City and did this. There was a baseball team. I had never played baseball in my entire life. And so, I did the baseball outings. We had golf trips and golf outings. I had never done golf before in my entire life. So there were so many new things that I experienced. And when I look back on that experience, I think I could have really sulked about that, and I really could have not been as engaged as I was. But I chose to kind of take the opposite, and to really make sure that I was as engaged as possible and trying to do as good of work as I could in spite of kind of the situation. And I did earn an opportunity to come back the following summer as a second year associate, which ultimately ended up turning into a full-time job. And it was my first full-time job out of law school.
Right. Well,
Graduating.
that's a great, great story, Michelle. And really what I'm hearing is that you just you just responded. It's your response really that made a difference, right? And you decided, no, I'm going to show up the best that I know, and do what I know best, and look at the result that you created, right? So when you went through that, what kind of, because I'm sure as the people are listening to you right now, number of them will say, yes, that resonates with me, or I am maybe right now in a situation like this, or I face that. What could be the advice maybe? Because it's the response that really makes the difference, right? What
Yeah.
could be maybe the advice that you would give them if they're currently facing a situation like this?
Yeah, I mean, I think when I look back on it, of course, hindsight is 50-50. And, the thing is that now I have so much wisdom and so much experience in my career. And I think the one thing I might have done differently is I might have actually gone to HR and asked the question
Mm.
as to what was the difference, right? Because now I know that, you don't things don't necessarily change unless you sometimes bring that to the attention of
Yes.
folks in positions of authority to make things different. And I found out later that some of the partners that I worked with, they didn't have any idea. They didn't know how offices were assigned, and they didn't know, I mean, of course they would know when they came by my office that I was in a smaller size office, but it never really occurred to them that that meant anything to me. And so I think the advice that I would give is, if it bothers you so much that it really does get in the way of how you're showing up and how you're presenting and your ability to do your best work, then it might behoove you to say something, just to at least have the conversation, so that you understand what were the dynamics that went into the decision making that caused you to be treated a little bit differently than somebody else. And so for me, in my particular situation, it did not bother me that much. I mean, I was able to kind of go on and kind of put on that optimism hat and that positivity hat and continue to have a good summer. But I will say that there were moments like when people came by my office and, they asked me a question, or my peers came to hang out. I did, in the back of my mind at times, think, wow, what must they think of me, right? I'm in this smaller office. Does this mean they think any less of me? Does this mean that they think that I don't deserve to be here? And I certainly questioned for a moment whether or not I deserve to be there, right? And whether or not I was just an affirmative action hire. So I think, just as I now have wisdom, I now have experience. I now have coached a number of baby lawyers and younger professionals, and even my daughters who are newly minted in their own careers, at least the older two, to just ask a question. And again, you ask the question from a point of curiosity. It doesn't have to be asking the question in a way that puts people on the defensive, or in a way that is um, just not positively framed. But I think that you can ask the question from a point of curiosity and wanting to understand, and giving people an opportunity to explain the situation.
That's a
That makes sense.
great advice. Great advice, Michelle. Now let's move forward. You had a very successful career as a lawyer and all that. However, 14 years later, you made a shift,
I did.
of industry, and that has been a significant shift for you as well,
Yeah.
and in your career. Tell us more about that. And first is, what made you want to make a shift? That's one thing. And then what went through your mind? Were you very confident, hesitant? How did that happen?
Yeah, absolutely. So there were a couple times when I made a shift in my career. One was to go from a practicing lawyer, where I practiced for 14 years, and then making the shift to enter into the administrative side of law and becoming a director of diversity for the first time. That shift wasn't as difficult because I had been a practicing lawyer at all different levels. So as I said, I had been a summer associate, I was an associate, I ultimately was of counsel. Then I was a partner, an equity partner within the firm. So I felt like I knew and understood all of the different levels of being working as a practicing lawyer, and have been successful at each one of those levels. And so that transition into a director of diversity role wasn't as difficult, because I felt like I had good substantive experience that I could share with other diverse lawyers who were kind of following along in my path. What became a little bit more difficult was, fast forward 12 years later, after I had been a director of diversity, after I had been promoted to chief diversity and professional development officer at my law firm, I then had this opportunity to move into healthcare. And I would say that when that opportunity first presented itself to me, I had imposter syndrome. I did not think that I was qualified to make that shift and to make that move. Because I didn't think, I didn't go to medical school, I didn't go to nursing school, I wasn't a radiologist, or any of these kind of specialty areas within medicine, that I felt like I needed to have a solid understanding of medicine and healthcare in order to be able to make that shift. And so it really took three different people calling me and encouraging me to apply for the job. And ultimately, there was a recruiter that called me from Children's Mercy that convinced me to finally come in and to have an initial conversation with them. And all of this was happening during COVID, right? So all of this was happening at a time when BIPOC, Black, Indigenous people of color, were being disproportionately impacted by COVID, this major global health pandemic. And so I knew that part of my job, and I talk about this in my chapter, I knew that part of my job was going to be to address healthcare disparities, right? And inequities, things that disproportionately impacted underrepresented or marginalized groups within our society. And I didn't know if I had the chops to do it, right? I didn't know if the diversity work that I had been doing in the legal sector and the civil rights work that I had done as a practicing lawyer, I just wasn't sure if that would translate over. And now, as I look back on it, I've been in this position in September, it will be 4 years. And as I look back on it, I'm so grateful that I did not let that imposter syndrome get the best of me, that I actually came in and did the interview for the job because I feel like I've made such a difference. It's been one of the most meaningful positions that I've had in my entire career, 35 plus year career since graduating law school. And I just feel like this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And so the opportunity to work with a team of individuals that's focused on creating greater workplace inclusion, that's focused on creating greater workforce inclusion. We also work with vendors and on marketplace inclusion, supplier diversity, and then we're working with our patients and families on eliminating healthcare disparities. And so it has been a real treat. I feel honored to be able to do this work with Children's Mercy every day. I have a wonderful team that I couldn't do this work without. And everything that I thought would happen or come to fruition in terms of not being able to do this job did not happen. And it didn't happen because I finally said to myself, you know what? You do have the chops. You can do this. And what you've done over the last 12 years in the DEI space, there's certainly a lot that can transfer over. And you do have an expertise that you've developed, you have a skill set that you've developed, and you need to not be scared to transfer those skills over. And so I got over my fear. I think sometimes we hold ourselves back because we have a fear of what if I fail? We have a fear of not being successful. And we just have to get move beyond that and get over our own selves at times.
Yeah. Thank you, Michelle, for sharing that. You know what I'm hearing as well is it's all about trusting ourselves more,
Yes. Yes.
right? It's
Mhm.
trusting ourselves more, trusting, we tend to undervalue, under recognize who we are, what we're bringing to the table. And it takes outsiders, like the three people who keep calling you, to say,
Yes.
no, we want you. And recognize it. Okay, if they want me, they must see something that I'm
They
not
must see
recognizing.
something in me that I am missing, obviously. And that's so true. And I'm so glad that they were persistent. One of the people was my now executive assistant, who our daughters had gone to grade school together. And she had been recruited by Children's Mercy as well. And she had been with Children's Mercy for, I think, about a year, year and a half. And when the position became available, she immediately called me and said, I think you would be great for this position. And I told her, I don't think so. I'm not a nurse. I'm not a doctor. And so I told her that. And then, ironically enough, the other person who called me was my first boss at that law firm, the first law firm that I told you about. He
Right?
was my first boss out of law school, and he had served on the board of Children's Mercy. So he knew a lot about Children's Mercy. And he called me and said, I think that you would be great for this position. You should consider it. And so it's just ironic how that was a full circle moment. Someone who I first started practicing law with, and we worked together for about 5 years. And then he would then circle back with me for this opportunity.
That's wonderful. Michelle, it's been such, I mean, really, I feel there's so many, quite a few gems that you shared here through your story, your lived experience, really inspiring and empowering to the people who are going to listen to you today. Um, as we are wrapping up, what is the last thoughts or closing thoughts that you want to share, piece of advice for the audience who is there with us today?
Yeah, I think the one piece of advice I would give is show up in your authenticity, show up as who you are. So often, especially when I was first a practicing lawyer initially, there were so many pieces to who I am. And I covered and hid so many of those pieces because I was afraid of rejection, and I was afraid to kind of show up in my fullness of, being this Black woman who grew up in the inner city, who, didn't have parents who were professionals. There were so many things about my background that were so different than the other people that were in my peer cohort in terms of the summer associates, and also who were practicing lawyers at the law firm. And so, if I have one piece of advice, it is own your uniqueness, because we are all unique, and it's that uniqueness that you bring your own diverse experiences, you bring your own diverse background, and those are the things that make you stand out and give you the opportunity to offer that unique piece of advice, that unique consultation that somebody might need, that unique perspective that you may be able to share with the work that you're doing, that somebody else is not going to have, because nobody is you. Only you are you, right? So I think that would be my one piece of advice: not to cover who you are, to embrace all of the intersecting identities that you bring to the table, because none of us is just one thing. I'm not just Black. I'm not just a female. I'm not just a US citizen. Like, there are so many other things that make me who I am. And that is rich.
Yeah.
It's rich, and it makes such a rich tapestry for who I am as a person, and how that helps me to own my own story and how I show up every day.
Thank you, Michelle. It was absolutely wonderful. And I know everybody's going to enjoy very much listening to you. So,
Thank you.
all right. Thank you, everyone, for listening and being with us today. Bye-bye.